Hello, thank you so much for joining me. This is Facilitating on Purpose, and I am Beth Cougler Blom, your host. I have someone coming up in conversation with me today who is a self-professed, self-directed learner, and this is a conversation that you should listen to if you love to self-direct your own learning, or you might need a little bit of a push in that direction to self-direct your own learning. It could be a conversation that you might find valuable if you want to help your participants or your students to self-direct their own learning. And it definitely is a conversation that you should listen to if you care about how people come together and how to inspire them and to cause them to come together meaningfully. I have Letícia Schuelter with me, and she is a community designer, an experience designer. She cultivates meaningful connection, learning, and collaboration in and around the communities that she's a part of. She leads the Meaningful Togetherness Lab, where she studies how collective spaces can foster transformation, co-creation, and shared agency. Letícia currently serves as head of community and belonging at The Bloom, designing peer learning events and engagement ecosystems that support a global community of 3,000 plus members. She also supports Earthkind as part of its network weaving team. I hope you enjoy this conversation talking about self-directed learning, coming together meaningfully in communities, and of course, the Meaningful Togetherness framework. Enjoy the show. Letícia, it's so great to see you again. I know we kind of had a pre-meeting a few months ago, and you've been doing great things since then. I can't wait to talk about it with you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It was Andy Sontag, I think, who gave me your name, and he was on the podcast. And I'm so happy when people are on and I say, I don't always ask previous guests, but I said, who else should I talk to? And he gave me several names, and yours was one. So that was a great recommendation from Andy. Have you come across him a lot in the past few years or for a long time?
Yeah, happy to hear it, first of all. Actually, we connect, I think it was somewhere around August or October last year, because he was doing this research on what makes to a meaningful experience design. And then Ana Maria recommended me so he could talk to me because I'm doing this research and this framework of meaningful togetherness. And he was curious and just want to know more. And back then, I didn't even have like the framework as developed as I have right now, but we just chat. And then later, there was this scaled pilot event where like a lot of experience designers discussing that. I think this is a life inquiry for all of us. But no, I didn't have any previous contact before that. Of course, I knew like their work, but I didn't have like any previous contact before then.
Yeah, it's lovely for me to do this podcast because then I get to come across all of you out there in different parts of the world. And, you know, you and he are in completely different locations, right? You're in Brazil and he's in Denmark, I believe, if my memory serves.
I think so,
Yeah.
yes.
But you're both experienced designers. And I don't know, maybe take me back a little bit. How did you become an experienced designer? Where did it start? It's a long story. I always say it's a long story, but what's kind of the short story of how you got here into this type of work?
I'm very good at saying yes to invitations because originally I thought I was going to be an engineer and I like study math and doing all of these things. But in the university, there was a lot of different programs happening. And a friend asked me, oh, there is this program that is around like learning experience in the countryside. Are you up for that? And I remember like very clear that I have a test upcoming the next day. And I say, yes, tell me later, I have to study. And I was not aware of that back then, but I just signed up for this journey that I am in. Like, I think I'll be for my whole life. And then I experienced these immersive settings. Suddenly we were all like in the countryside doing workshops. And then I got home and I was like, this is magical. There is something here. I need to pay attention. And that kept happening. So afterwards, like I did an exchange program, got to learn more about design, communities, a lot of different initiatives, facilitation, got back home, got into the design university, kept looking for those opportunities. And the more that I searched for, the more I saw myself in immersive scenarios and learning experiences. And I kept having this feeling that some of those experiences are quite powerful, but I didn't have the words to understand why. And I think that's where it all started. And then I started my career in community and things follow through.
I love how you said that it's magical. It's such a great word, and maybe we need to use it more in this type of work.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I was actually in the beginning trying to refrain from using it because it sounds a little bit fluffy for some people. But doing the framework, I interview a lot of people. And even when I like consciously, intentionally avoid using the word magical, they would use it. And I was like, how? We know we were talking about the same thing. It is kind of magical. It is.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation there about why you wouldn't want to use the word magic. I mean, it's kind of concerning, right? But I
Yeah.
love that we would use it more, and maybe we're all ready to use it more.
Absolutely. I have a friend, she says that people will use all sorts of words to not use the word love in organizations. They will use connection, wonder, and this and that. And I think with Metro, it's the same thing. We will use different words, but like we know your meaning.
Yeah. Actually, I think I was just reminded, do you know the author Bell Hooks? Have you heard
Yes.
of that name? Yeah. So I think one of their books was called something like All About Love. I want to say was the title that I read a while ago. But bell hooks, very well known, but I can't remember her pronoun, but I'll say they. I can't remember if they use she or they. They were using love for years ago. It was published a bunch of years ago, that book. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't know how the title it is in English, but I really like how they say that love is a verb and needs to like translate into action. So it's very powerful.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a design university. Can you just touch on that for a second? What is the design university that you went to after you discovered this field?
I'm from the south of Brazil, so I'm from a state called Santa Catarina, which is for folks who are like trying to understand the geography of things, is closer to Argentina and Uruguay than the middle of Brazil, just to give a little bit of perspective. And they have a design program in there, and I choose the graphic design because in my head it was like more of a diversity options. But during the university program, there was a lot of opportunities. There was a lot of what they call like extension programs, and one of those was around learning. It was this amazing professor that I admire her like a lot. She's amazing. She's very wonderful, and she basically created a university inside the university. She was hacking the university, all volunteer based, about people. People have a lot to offer, and there was a lot of empty roles in the university, and that was before COVID hit. And then I got to know her and that wonderful project, and through one of those workshops, I got to understand there is such thing as creative learning space, alternative learning space. So I did design, but I actually never worked as a graphic design. I mean, like if my mother or my father-in-law needs some work, like, oh, can you
Yeah.
make me a card or something? Then I'll do it. But design for me is more like the way you think about an idea or a problem up until like creating possibilities and then test it out, like the idea, the mindset of the design that stuck with me, the graphic stuff, just for hobbies today. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I love that you took it for just its philosophies, basically, and you can do so much with that. You mentioned in your bio, I think, too, that you'd been part of alternative learning communities. So that it sounds like that was one. Were there others that you grew up with or formed you?
Yeah. So the main one, I would say it's one. It just changed its name to NEEPS, but it used to be called Master of Learnings. And although the name is in English, it was like a Brazilian self-direct learning community run by Alex Bretas, which I'm not sure you're familiar with his work or not.
No.
Another wonderful human being that can put you in contact. He's amazing. He basically got this concept of self-direct learning from the Ecoversities Network and Blake Bowles, but then took it and brought it into Brazil and not only translated it, but evolved it through a Brazilian lens, if I may say it. That was during COVID. And what happened is that a self-direct learning community will force you to rethink the way you think about learning, the way you own or not your own learning progress. even the first question, which may be, what are the things that you're interested in learning? And then understand that you don't necessarily need like to outsource that to a program by stamp or something. You can, if that's part of your journey, if you're being intentional about that. There's nothing, people are not against like formal education, but there is a step back, like a step before that, which is, what do you want to learn? And it's not a question we hear at school. And that was quite transformative, not only because of the process, but because of the people that I met in there. It's full of wonderful facilitators, community builders, experienced designers, professors, and whatnot.
That's amazing. Oh, and again, there's a whole conversation there about what the current school system looks like and that question that isn't being asked. What do you want to learn? It would be so much more powerful. And as a parent of I'm not going to talk about her too much because she wouldn't like that, but she's 17, and if she'd been asked that question a lot more during her schooling, I think something different would have happened for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and then teenagers, they're full of potential, right? They're so creative. They have many ideas. They have a lot of energy to put into action. It's wonderful. Whenever I see like a good like learning project directed to teenager, it honestly gives me hope because I know like they're capable of so much.
They are, absolutely. But even supervisors out there that might be listening, I mean, if people ask their employees or their colleagues that question more often, even our colleagues in the field, right? Learning design, experience design, facilitation, what do you want to learn and how do you want to grow? And all those good, juicy questions. It would be really advantageous to all of us.
Yes, and that touches on a very important thing. Is actually one of the pillars of a meaningful experience is you have to have agency over the things that you are building, over the things that you are learning. It's not always comfortable, I would say, to have agency over your learning, for example, because we were not prepared for that. And then again, like we have all this schooling mindset. We're trained to do a certain type of thing in a certain way. And if we are not doing that thing in that way, that means that we're failing. And that's it's a very dangerous mindset to have because, I know, everyone knows, everyone's the workforce knows, like you will have to figure it out. Eventually, there is a lot of things that will like rely on your ability to own your agency. And I think it all starts with this idea that people are autonomous. That should be respected, and there is a lot of power to that. Whether we are talking about a working environment, whether we are talking about a learning experience, or any kind of convening and gathering, if you want people to participate, then they should care for that. And for them to be able to care for that, you have to allow them to have agency over the process.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's some unlearning that people need to do around that. Like you say, it's difficult. We haven't been asked that question enough and take on that agency. So is there friction there for people when you're asking them to do that, to be able to create these experiences together?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think for this community in particular, the Masters of Learning, I participated in that actively for it was like sprints, right? So it was 3 sprints, so 3 years basically. Give it or take. And on the first one, I couldn't answer that question at all. I was like, I need to reflect on that. I don't know. Like I don't know. I draft a lot of learning questions for myself. None of those felt right in the beginning. So yeah, it was quite uncomfortable really. But I got this curiosity and that kept me going, just trying to refine that and understanding. And even that, this willingness to understand that, all right, you're going to start your learning journey, but you don't know what's going to happen after that. And you're going to iterate as it happens. And you have a whole set of community and you have, of course, conversations and you change your perspective and then you expand the way that you understand things. And that's all part of the process. But again, very different to what we're told in school. School like is very linear, right? Have this problem, you learn ABC, and then you try to remember that, and you're done. But that's not, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll get my daughter to listen to this episode because what you just said about, it's iterative is so true. I've been trying to share that message myself. But in your work, and so, you've been part of these communities, but in your work, you've had a couple of experiences in your employment now where you are leading big, big communities, designing experiences for them. Do you want to say a little bit about the opportunities you've had there?
Yeah. So what I'm understanding more and more is every community will be like a different universe. And I don't mean that like lightly. One of the reasons is community is a big word and has been used in many, many scenarios. People will mean like very different things. So I have experience, for example, in in-person community for entrepreneurs in a co-working space. That's one thing. They are mainly there because of the co-working. The community comes later and then they decide to stay because of the community most of the time. That's one scenario. The other scenario is I'm leading the community at the Bloom, which is more than 3,000 people now in the social impact space that they want to upskill, they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to have access to opportunities. Whole different conversation. I'm also involved in working with another community, very small, like it's not even 60 people. So in that case, it's way more relational. The connection, people knew each other. I also had an experience about doing a community for learning. Whole other conversation, because then we have more of a container, like, oh, this is a learning journey. It was actually a learning committee. It was all volunteer based, which was amazing. People were there because they absolutely want to be in there. And in that case, it was like a micro community. We're like 6 people doing the best that we could because we believe in learning. We are like absolutely, we care a lot about that. That's on our hearts. So I have a lot of different experience. What I can take from each and every one of those is that people will stay because of the sense of connection and belonging. But most of the time, they see the community as a transition to something or as a place that they want to be in because they want to grow. And one of the reasons is we have limited capacity, limited attention, like in our lives. So you have to choose. And the original community, let's put it that way, would be like your family, your neighborhood, or maybe like if you were in a church, that's a good example, or in the scouts. Fewer and fewer people have that, like connection for connection's sake. So today, community, I think it's a bit of connection, it's a bit of value. Those things should be in balance. There needs a structure for like running everything. But it's interesting. I see the landscape changing, and I'm just interested to see like how that unfolds, and more interested myself into the relationality part of that, and like the in-person part of that.
Okay, so it sounds like, a couple of those at least are online, but you're really drawn to the more in-person community building work.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. They feel more magical. That's there is more potential for magic in there. Yeah.
I know. I'm thinking about the word joy too. I mean, there's a joyfulness in some of this or all of it for you. Where do you find joy in the work of stewarding these communities? And I guess what word do you call, it's a two-part question. What word do you use to call, do you call yourself a steward? So where's the joy and what do you call yourself as you do this?
So the first question, where is the joy? I think there is a lot of joy in the small moments of connection, like in whether there is in person or an online conversation like the one that we are having right now. I love talking to people. I love if I can connect them to someone else. I do this like in my own life. My friends know me like, oh, you introduced me to so many like cool people. And some of them are dating right now. Like
Nice.
that
Yeah.
has happened. Like I'm not like a matchmaker in that regard, but that happens. But yeah, so there is joy into that. There is also joy into being able to create an environment where people feel at ease and can show their talents, show their skills. I deeply believe that everyone has a beautiful thing to offer to the community, but that's not something we can take for granted. Not, it's not. People have it. That doesn't mean that they have the space to share. So I like, and I'm like, I feel really inspired when I can see an environment where people feel that they can share, that they are appreciated, that they feel safe enough so they can do it. And then it's not only that that person will flourish, but it's that the whole community will flourish as well because of that sharing. So that's wonderful. And I've learned to enjoy the process of the backstage. Like in the beginning, I would say like there is the cool part of the work and there is emails and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And then right now, I'm kind of liking the spreadsheet part of it as well, like making like a Notion dashboard, making everything works. The email part is still like, I do it because I have to do it. But the dashboard part, I don't know. I think it's my teenager mind of like, oh, maybe I'll be an engineer. Like this logic mindset, there is still a bit of that in me. So I appreciate that as well.
That's exactly where my brain was going. I was like, that's your engineer's brain just sort of geeking out on the it's nice though. It's you've got a well-rounded brain in that regard, right? You can do it all. Yeah. So what do you
Yeah.
call yourself? Do you call yourself a facilitator when you're leading these communities? Do you call yourself a steward? Do you have, I mean, obviously you have, maybe non-English words as well, right? You can feel free to say them all, right? In your language as well.
Mhm. That's a great question that I'm not sure how to answer. I think there is a little bit of identity crisis in there, maybe. But also, I have said this before, I feel we're lacking a word, like an umbrella word, because I see myself doing community work, like as a community builder and a community weaving, but I'm also a facilitator, but I'm also experience design, but I'm also involved in learning experience, but we don't have a word for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to answer the question. I would say I really like the mindset of the designer because like when it's well done, design will always put the human at the center. And I believe it should also put nature at the center. Like there is this mindset that like right, we're not like the only species around. But and then that can be applied. I can design a workshop, can design a community, a structure, but it also feels like a hard word, like because there's a lot of relationality. So weaving feels best for community, but when I'm designing experience, then I'm designing. Like I have my paper and I have my pens and I have everything. I have a methodology and I am developing the framework. So to your questions, I feel we should invent a new word. I'm calling like like in my own notes, in my own notebook or WhatsApp or whatever, I call it's CLXD, which would be like community learning experience design.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
because that's how I got it together. But yeah, I think we're definitely lacking our word in there.
Yeah, I know we all have to use 3 or 4 words, as you've said, to describe the different aspects. But maybe you can say a little bit more about community weaving. And I know what network weaving you've also used on your LinkedIn profile. So, and it's been a while since I thought about weaving, although I know there's all big, communities out there like using the word weaving. Like, what type of weaving are you trying to describe? Like, what is, I guess I should just say, what is community weaving to you? If for those of people who there's maybe people who have never heard that word in and around our area of work before.
So yeah, so I have seen very different words being used alongside of community to describe this type of work. Some people use community building. I have seen community architect. I've seen community catalyst, community steward, and community weaving, and that's on the top of my mind. And I think it's because community is such of a complex ecosystem. Then you can really approach for different things, different like lands and different perspectives. And there is also the point that some communities will exist to serve the innovation of a single product. In that case, I think it's really just architect or building because you're just building for that. So like kind of imposing a little bit more of an agenda, but that's not like set in stone, right? That's how I see it. And the other side, when you use a word like stewarding or living, then you're referring more to how people relate to one another and how they feel connect to the community. For example, if you have a community, imagine that we are like I have a magic wand and now we're living together in a building, but all the families in the building have a say on how we are doing things. Suddenly, it's not that we are building an infrastructure because we need the number of engagement or we need X or Y. but we need to be able to have a good relationship to one another and have some sort of governance that allow us to have a decision-making process that is healthy, regenerative, perhaps. So, and then that word of building suddenly like it doesn't make sense anymore because it's more about like how people relate to one another and how we are guiding ourselves through the process of being mostly.
Yeah, being with each other. That's
Yeah.
helpful. And you mentioned nature before, and I'm, kind of been turning that over in the back of my mind, going, oh my gosh, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone put nature in the center, right, of a design process or whatever. Like usually we're putting in the human in the center, but you've broadened that to maybe all living things or something like that, nature at the center. And is that part of the weaving for you too?
As a holistic approach, I would say yes. And what I mean by that is if we think about human beings as the only like important species, there is a lot of other assumptions that usually follow that the work is then the center of the human, like the human is the center of the world, and the work is the center of the human. Therefore, we need to optimize for efficiency or for production. So there is a kind of a mindset that follows through. And then I draw inspiration. There is this designer, she's called like Terry Irwin. And if I'm not mistaken, she's a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. And she said something, she has a TED talk, and she said something brilliant. I think it's brilliant. She said that she was a designer, like I think it was like a brand designer, a product designer, something like that. She was great at what she did, very successful. And then she realized that she was solving a problem well from A to B. But from a broader perspective, she was making our environment worse because she could be creating like the best package ever for that product and that company would sell more because of that. So that goal was like check. But in a broader perspective, she was creating more garbage. So like it doesn't really make sense, depends on the lens that you use. And then when I listened to that, that really made sense for me. And that's why, and I have like a close relation with nature. I feel in peace and I feel grounded. It's very like linked to my spirituality, like not to any singular religion, but to my spirituality. And I think if you were to build or to design or to, I don't know, collectively co-create a world that feels good for us, we need that. Like we are part of nature, not a part of it. So like we should be thinking about that. Like you should be at least considering composting, which is like a tiny, tiny step into everything, but it's also a huge like gap to what we do now and what we should be doing. I think that's a little bit of what I mean. If you see just a problem and then you offer a solution, it's closer to that school mindset. And if you see a possibility and all the consequences, like more of a system thinking, it's closer to this agency and this nature center mindset.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it makes me think about the sort of how sustainability comes into our conversations too. I want to say that the Session Lab folks somehow asked about sustainability and facilitation in one of their surveys that they had. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to kind of dig into that aspect more, maybe in another podcast, if anyone out there is listening and wants to talk about sustainability or, taking care of the environment in our work. Yeah, that's an interesting sidebar. Yeah, thanks for that. Now, tell me about the meaningful togetherness framework, because this is something you've been creating for yourself and for communities. Where did this start? And tell me, tell us all what it is.
This is my life inquiry. In a way, like my learning question finally like grounded and I was up to understand it better. So what happens in there is, of course, we live in a world that's highly connected and we have endless possibilities for gatherings, convenings, events. There's a lot of happening all the time. But that doesn't mean that when you attend one of those, you feel connected to the purpose of it, to other people. And it's rare, it's really meaningful. And when it is meaningful, it's hard to articulate why. And because I was, as I mentioned, like back then, I stumbled into this program and I got back home. I was like this was magical. What happened? And that happened like over and over again. I decided to investigate and understand, like, all right, but why some experiences are so powerful and why some are so flat? And between one thing and another, there is this mystery. And then I was in an experience design program 2 years ago, and they have part of that. It was like a self-direct learning. They call it a living research, living question, or something like that, but the idea was the same. And a professor told me, like, you should ask an important question. And then I was like, okay, I'll ask the most important question for me, which is like, what makes it special? What makes it meaningful? And then the title kind of gives away, like, it's our meaning, it's our togetherness. But I understood that there is 4 main pillars to then have an experience be meaningful in a collective setting, which is implied in the title. One of the things is the meaning part, which will span across all of the others, but I mean more like a purposefulness in the aspect of narrative, which is super important for like making meaning in your life. And then the other would be the originality part of that. And I like intentionally didn't use belong because belong is a whole other thing. Like you can live a very meaningful experience and you don't get in touch with those people anymore, like never again. So I like to distinguish that mainly because I came from community, and you can have the most wonderful event ever. That doesn't mean you're building a community. You can, that can help a lot, but that's two different things. And then the third one would be agency, as we briefly discussed. And the fourth one would be transcendence, which is the one closest to magic, to elaborate a little bit on that. But for example, if we're talking about meaning, if you're having a birthday, could be a very simple one. Same scenario, two scenarios, same birthday. In the first one, you just live through. Even if it's the same thing, but in the second one, you were a little bit more intentional and you connect the meaning of that birth to your narrative, how that relates to you, then you can integrate that. That's a step towards meaningful experience. And I analyze my own notes. It turns out I have like years of notes because I was going to leave out, I was leaving those things, and then I'll get back home and I try to answer some questions and write. And then I interview a lot of people, read a lot of articles, and then recently did a Meaningful Togetherness lab, because one of the things I learned from the learning community is that you learn best in community and you don't know everything. And if you're open to understand that there is much you don't know, then you are open to learn with others. So I invited everyone who wanted to join. It was free. I did one cohort in Portuguese and one cohort in English. So we were like exploring each of the pillars in each session to then have a more comprehensive understanding of the whole framework.
So you brought together these two groups, these two separate groups, and they were virtual conversations? Or was there an asynchronous online part to that, or virtual conversations to go through the 4 pillars?
It was virtual. It was a session for each pillar. And then there people had opportunity for connect to one another. There was a lot of people who already knew each other. There are those people that we are kind of stumbling upon each other all the time. So it was great to finally connect with some of them. And then I set out a text for reading as well for each of those pillars as we are having the conversation and was doing the research. One of the things that I learned about myself is if I want to get something done, as in a deliverable, a thing that I can show to other people, I need a deadline and I need an accountability.
Yeah.
So that was also the goal, to be completely
The
honest.
sessions were coming up. You better write the thing or find the resource or whatever.
Yes, because otherwise, like, we are striving to have a perfect thing before we show others, and that's not how it works. At least not for me. Like, it's again like this idea of iterating. Like you build and you refine, and then you talk to people and see what lands and keep building. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got to really put into perspective some things. Some people ask me like, but why did you create like a new framework? Because there is so many. And I think there is a few reasons for that. It's a learning process for me. It's my own learning journey. And there is a belief that I have is that if we took anything, that if we took like this cup, it's a teacup, it's for my mother-in-law, there's a lot of that in the world. There's a lot of that. But if I was to make one, then it would be through my lens and through my understanding and the process to do of building something, the process of like putting something out there. It's a very rich process for knowing oneself and understanding more in depth what that means for you. So that's one reason. And the other is that it's a passion project. And that what that means is through all of those experiences that I lived through, most of those were not commercial, that doesn't have like a big brand. They were immersive. It was just we're not comfortable. And it's hard to put into perspective. So it's a very specific thing. So although we have a lot of frameworks, we don't have something for that. And I highly believe in the power of immersive experiences for expanding your worldview, for understanding better who you are. And when you have that in a collective, we have a lot of space for a rich experience because you have time. You have a lot of time. So you can connect to people, you can build trust, you can build this emotional bond. Usually those experiences, the best ones, we have a very clear challenge ahead of us and we had to do something together that was important. And the outcome of that would depend on the skills and energy of the people present. So there is a high sense of agency as well. And the transcendence part was mostly through this perspective expansion that I mentioned, and also nature, like this beautiful landscape with these beautiful scenarios, and also a lot of rituals. All of the important experiences that I had, they had some sort of rituals. They had some sort of threshold, and then marks your transition from one point to another. And it's a great opportunity for you to connect deeper with each other, with yourself, and with the values of everything. And it's a very rare setting where you have that. So all of those frameworks, they're invaluable as well, but they are more broad. And I want something more specific because I highly believe in that. Like the learning space that I believe, have space for that. Have space for deep connection, for play, for transcendence, for you to discovering your curiosity, have time for being there and the serendipities of it all. So yeah, that's why I set myself up to exploring that. And I think it's going to always be a unfinished work, meaning I always want to develop and expand and test it out and see where it goes.
Oh, I have so many questions. Thanks for sharing that. It's sort of that, quote unquote, justification for why you created your own. It makes a lot of sense to me because I had the same thing when I wrote my first book and I guess my second as well, that you figure out what you think when you do those things because you're asking what other people think and then you're having to compare and contrast, and yeah, it's a deep exploration that you give yourself for whatever the thing is that you're creating. And you've already told us that you're a self directed learner, and it's just another thing that allows you to be able to do that, and you're modeling that as well, which makes me think about, did you feel the pressure as you ran the lab to embody the pillars that you were asking people about? Was there pressure to model everything that that's inside the framework?
Yeah, a little bit, I would say. It's more that in the ideal scenario, I would be able to offer a immersive experience, like a very like a good container with space for people to develop those qualities on this, with a good container for people to develop these relationality experiences. But it was online setting, and I have my full-time job on the side, and I was living as a nomad back then. Well, now I'm setting for a few months here in Florianopolis. But there's a lot of things that were happening. And I decided to do nonetheless, because if I was to wait for the perfect moment, I was never going to do it. So I think the pressure comes from, I know that I could offer more. I want to offer more of a full and rich experience and with a lot of things for people to explore and a lot of a beautiful landscape, a beautiful offsite. But it was not possible. Like I was traveling, people were all over. There was a free project. So I had to make peace with that because of that. And because I have life didn't stop for me to do it.
And it was kind of a prototyping sort of minimum viable product sort of thing as
Yes.
well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did the pillars change as you went through the lab? Like what iterated because of that experience?
They did. Yeah, they did. So they changed in two ways. One, I was able to better develop, so better articulate and get more of a in-depth, okay, but what does this mean? And what does it mean in practice? So that happened. Because prior to that, I don't have the cards here with me, but I make some cards for a workshop that I did. So they have just a short description, and I want to go a little bit more in depth of what those things mean. And especially the first pillar, because the first pillar was meaning and significance. I'm translating as I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And then I understood that although that makes sense to be the first pillar, that's more of a thing that encompasses all of the pillars. So now I'll be focusing more on some aspects of meaning. One of those is being aligned with your values and the thing about narrative that we were talking about before, because I think that makes it more tangible and getting meaning as more of an umbrella thing that shows us. Because of course, for it to be meaningful, all of the four pillars have to be activated, quote unquote. So that was the biggest change. One of other, because each pillar has its own principles. So one of other principles, I changed the name or I changed briefly how I would approach it, but was really when I have to explore and articulate better, then I was I think I'll change that. And sometimes it was one day, 2 days before I send the text, I was very stressed about it, but I couldn't send it out because I didn't believe in that particular order anymore. So I have to change it. So it was a roller coaster for me.
Oh my gosh. And is the original framework in Portuguese and then you've had to come up with an English version as well? Like, are you working in two languages as you do this as well?
I am working to language. And then because a part of developing the framework was this live research from the design certificate program from UDESC Works. And they were a company in the US. So everyone speaks in English. And I was to present to fellow classmates. So I was presenting in English. And I did an immersive experience to test it out here in Florianópolis in Portuguese. And it was very hard to translate. Even the name of the immersive experience is travessia, which is Portuguese and Spanish word, meaning threshold, but also crossing, but also transition. And then I was okay, I need to come up with a name in English. So I come up with meaningful togetherness. And funny thing is, now I can't translate it back. I don't have a way to say this in Portuguese without having a long sentence, which doesn't work. So I'm just calling meaningful togetherness. And yeah, until I find a Portuguese word for that.
Oh, language. It's fascinating, right? And complex trying to find because yeah, some words in English there just aren't. Or maybe you've got the opposite happening now too. You're trying to get it back into Portuguese and get the right nuances there. That's tricky. Did you publish it online yet for folks? Like how can they find it?
I haven't published. I mentioned a few things here and there, but I'm working on publish it. But I'm not sure where to start now. I just finished the lab and I'm all right, what's the next step here? And I'm on this journey of becoming going more into a freelance thing and starting my own company. So I think that will be a part of the conversation at some point. But I'm very keen to publish and have this more of an open conversation with fellow experienced designers. There is a part of the framework still that I want to develop further, which is around engaged collaboration, which means that there is a different ways for us to collaborate. We could be doing the project together, we could be creating something together, and we could embody collaboration. And that requires some sort of body sync either for music or for dance or some sort of ritual. And in my experience, that put us in a state of flow to be able to collaborate better. And that tracks to those experiences that I lived through and have heard of in the interviews. So that's important part of that I want to better articulate, for example. But as I mentioned, I think I just have to make peace with myself that will be a never finished thing, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe at some point I just start a new life inquiry for myself. But for now, it's on the plans to publish.
Yeah, but it wasn't the point, it sounds like. I mean, it's nice if you can get there and you have time and you can put it out to the world, but it wasn't necessarily the true reason why you did it to,
Yeah.
put the Letícia brand out there and
Yeah. It was more of a learning process, learning journey, putting together what I believe to be true, and what I think is good for other people as well.
Absolutely. It's inspiring for anybody who wants to create anything, really, whether it's a framework or a book or a podcast or a something, an experience. Absolutely. There are things that we can just do for ourselves and they're what others can benefit from as well. But sometimes it's driven by our own need for what we need to do, right? Like as we've discussed. Yeah, there's lots of journeys you've been on that you created for yourself.
Yeah, and I think I'm only able to put that together because I have seen in those self-directed learning communities, people creating things out of thin air because they believe that. So for example, I have a friend, she traveled Brazil, not like for touristic things or festivals. She traveled to learn how to play a pandeiro, which is like a drumming thing people use in samba. So that was her goal. So she made a journey, like a physical one, because she was traveling, with her goal, which is to learn that instrument, a particular one. And I thought that was fascinating because she created something for her. She created a journey for herself. And the goal of her learning journey was to play with other people and have fun. And any like multiple other examples, but I have seen that. I have seen people creating things from their hearts, from their needs, or sometimes was a thing of work that were needed for the work, but most of the time was of things that people find relevant and meaningful in their lives. Then they would put the work to then create something, whether that is a piece of art, a process, a traveling, a framework, anything's possible.
Anything is possible. Oh, that's such a nice note to end on and just leave us with that peace, right? Anything is possible. And is there anything you want to say to encapsulate what you shared with us today to go forward with?
Yeah, that was great. That was a great conversation. I appreciate it. I got a lot of reflections as I speak to you, especially around this influence that the self-directed learning communities have in my journey and how important that is. And that only connects me more and more with the care and importance that I find that to have. I really believe that education can be transformative if we give people space and we put magic and love at the center. Yeah, that's what I believe, and I'm happy to make even a small contribution to that.
Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to watch what you're doing. I know we're connected. Everyone should find you on LinkedIn and the other places you are. Thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself and your passions with me and all of us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was a joy. It was a very joyful experience. Thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with Letícia. I want to highlight a couple of things that she said in the episode that you probably heard me remark on at the time, but I just wanted to reinforce and reiterate them with you here. The first thing was when she talked about near the beginning of the episode that we don't often ask people what they want to learn. And I just agree with her so much on this, that if our school systems and even our adult education had more of a focus on asking people what they want to learn to be able to do the things that they want to do, it might be transformational to those environments and certainly to the people involved. The neat thing is that she's doing that herself, and that's why she came up with the Meaningful Togetherness framework. She said it was and is a life inquiry for her. I love those words too. You can think about if there's a life inquiry that you should be on for yourself right now, that maybe there's something, maybe it doesn't have to be a framework, maybe there's something else that you could pursue for your own learning, just because you're asking yourself to do it. It doesn't have to be what anyone else wants you to do, whether you're working for an employer or working for your clients or whatnot. What kind of life inquiry do you want to be on for yourself and create for yourself? In so many respects, this episode is inspiration, I hope, for you to self-direct your own learning where you can and where you want, and find those paths for yourself that you want to go on, the learning journeys that you need to have. Thank you so much again to Letícia Schuelter for having this conversation with me, sharing this work that she's starting to put out into the world and learn from it and grow from it. I very much appreciated the conversation, and I hope you did too. Coming up next on the podcast, I have a conversation with another podcast host. You may be familiar with her. Her name is Nathy Revez, and we're going to be talking about making early connections with participants, how to do that, why we would do that, and so much more. I invite you to join Nathy and I then. I can't wait to get this podcast host behind the interview desk and out in front of this conversation. Join us then. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. You can find the show notes at facilitatingonpurpose.ca. That's where we give you the links for the things that people have mentioned or the resources people have indicated in every episode. Feel free to reach out to me about any episode to share feedback. I'd always love to hear from you. And please, I would love it as well if you would share it with a friend or a colleague who you think might enjoy it as well. This one particularly might be good if you have any self-directed learners in your life, or if you would like to spur someone on to do something self-directed, to go on their own life inquiry journey. Thank you so much for sharing, and I really appreciate you spreading the word. Lastly, as always, thank you so much to Mary Chan of Organized Sound Productions. She makes us sound good on every episode, and I love that I still get to have her support as our audio editor. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.